formed from comrades who had a variety, perhaps, of political positions, but who were brought together out of the fallout from our joint leaving of the George Galloway-led Workers' Party of Britain. And whilst we all had our individual reasons for leaving that particular project, I think there are certain commonalities which are worth emphasising. The first of these is that we all, in our own way, came to reject two things that many left projects in Britain that have attempted to substitute themselves for the Labour Party have in common. The first is the narrow obsession with parliamentarism and the obsession with getting representation in the House of Commons, or perhaps even the House of Lords. The driver of activity towards that, and how it consumes so much of not just the Workers' Party's time, but other organisations which many of us have been involved with over the years. And then the other and the bigger question was, of course, the question of not just the Labour Party, but of Labourism. And Labourism, of course, is I think maybe we all agree here, perhaps some will disagree, but we all came to see it as a curse upon the working class movement in Britain, in that it paralyses working class action. And this Labourism has been a curse on the movement for over 100 years now. Many of you will, of course, be aware of the number of struggles that the Labour Party and the trade union bureaucracy have come together to jointly sell out. I won't go through the full list because we'll probably be here till next week at the very least. But to emphasise a couple of points, the Labour Party was formed not by the workers themselves, the working class of Britain, but by an arrangement between trade union bureaucracy and the middle class socialist intelligentsia. They were the principal drivers of it. It was in response, yes, to waves of militancy, but it was always designed to control that militancy, to make sure that it was channeled into acceptable areas that the ruling class could more easily manipulate and dominate. And the history of the Labour Party unto this day is one of the policing of the working class, the shoving of working class dissent into the dead end of the parliamentary struggle, or the even dead end of the council struggle. And the Labour Party has been the recipient of and the beneficiary of waves of working class militancy, not just in Britain, but all the way across the world. How many years can the Labour Party continue to dine out on the legacy of 1945 to 51, for instance, which of course was a period of reform? But we need to understand that that period of reform was only made possible because of, first of all, the militancy and the strength of the working class movement domestically, but also the strength of the international revolution. Both the Russian Revolution, later the Chinese Revolution, the anti-colonial revolution, all contributed to weakening the position of the British ruling class to the point where reform was their only option, and they chose the Labour Party to deliver it. The Labour Party, of course, did deliver a period of reform, but it's been backwards ever since, because the Labour Party is a vehicle, a political vehicle, for British imperialism, for the British ruling class. And as part of its duties, when it's allowed into power, when it's called up from the reserves bench, when the main team gets tired or too corrupt or too discredited, they bring in the Labour Party to offer you the illusion of change. And I will say this for Sir Keir Starmer. It's always very important to remember his title. He's done a lot to earn it. He is, if nothing else, delivering something which is truly unique. He's not even pretending to stand for change. And in that sense, I hope he remains Labour leader from here to eternity. But the point about the forming of the project in relation to the Labour Party and the trade union bureaucracy is that we came to the conclusion that the problem isn't just with the trade union leaders, it isn't just with the Labour Party, it's with the entire political culture that the domination of Labourism over the working class has. It's a culture that breeds paralysis, that does not breed militancy, the opposite in fact, it breeds a kind of complacency, shall we say, abstract worship of so-called leaders who are brought up before us every few years as the great new left hope, only to inevitably betray a few years later. And the betrayal is inherent, comrades, in the very system. The system of the trade union bureaucracy in Britain and in all the imperialist countries is one that is completely integrated into the system of the British capitalist state. The trade union bureaucracy have been integrated into the British state for over 100 years. And it's not just a question of their relationship with the Labour Party. They are used by the British state to manage trade union struggle, to manage it into a dead end quite a lot of the time. And so when we were looking at that, and when we were involved, all of us, in the Workers' Party project, we could see that what many in that project wanted to do was to set up a newer, somehow better version of the Labour Party. Well, comrades, I think I will speak for many here, certainly my comrades from the project, when I say that the time for Labourism is long gone. The time for the reform of British capitalism is long past. British capitalism is no longer capable of delivering any reforms, nor does the ruling class have any intention to deliver any now. Even if the movement was stronger than it is now, what it would lead us into is actually a more intense fight, because British capitalism, British imperialism is rotting, it is decaying, and that is why it is engaging in so many violent wars of attempted conquest, thankfully failed wars of conquest increasingly all over the world. It is not going to reform itself. The question is now, so you go back to the phrase of Marx himself, socialism or barbarism. The ruling class will choose barbarism every single time. They would burn down the entirety of this island rather than let us have a single inch of it. But the point is, and this comes to the purpose of the project, the point is for us as workers, for us as members of the working class, that we as a class need to realise our potential power. And this goes back all the way to the early period of capitalism. Not a thing moves, not a thing gets made, delivered to the shops, delivered to the cafes, delivered to the bars, delivered anywhere, without, of course, the active labour of the working class. Now that is seemingly a basic point, but for many it seems to have been forgotten. And through the propaganda of the ruling class over my entire lifetime, and the lifetime of most comrades now, it has been to make so many people in the imperialist countries forget they belong to the working class, or to see that being working class is somehow something that is shameful, something that is to be shed, disposed of. Everybody wants to be a temporarily embarrassed millionaire, perhaps. But the point is that we need to bring back to the class that sense of itself again. And by that I mean to have the knowledge and the consciousness that without our labour, there is no economy. The economy is not an abstract thing floating up in the air. It is the concentration of the entire set of economic relations that without the active labour of the working class would not exist. And that is what we need to get back to. So our purpose as a project is to do two things. First of all, it's to spread that awareness of what being working class actually means, to show that the workers in Britain, that the land, that the nation is theirs for the taking to a certain extent, because it is the labour of ourselves and our immediate ancestors that helped build this nation. It is the labour of workers today which keep it going. Without that, there is nothing. Without the speculations and the fraud of the ruling class, everybody could quite easily get by. Perhaps you wouldn't even notice they were gone. Maybe, of course, life would immediately get better if they were. But without the labour of the working class, there is nothing. But that knowledge has been taken away from so many of us. And so many of us, you grow up feeling disempowered, feeling isolated, feeling atomised, or alienated from both your labours and yourself. And that is what we need to recover from. Because for over a generation, the propaganda of the ruling class has been triumphant, trying to portray absolutely everybody as somehow just a step away from the middle class, or even a step away from the ruling class itself. This is all, of course, a deliberately fostered illusion, comrades. And we must get back to the point where not only can workers see that the land is theirs by dint of the fact that they and their ancestors have laboured to make this country into what it is, but also that it could be so much better if the ruling class were disposed of once and for all. And of course, I should add a legal disclaimer in an entirely peaceful and an entirely consensual manner. Now that's out of the way, let's carry on. The point of the project, therefore, is to tackle the two problems that afflict the working class movement. The biggest problem is that of the trade union bureaucracy and it being a dead hand on the development of militancy, and of course the relationship, the paralysing relationship with the Labour Party. How many struggles just in the last year have we seen sold out and compromised and destroyed by trade union leaders, alleged leaders, who are in reality working on behalf of the ruling class, whether they know it or not? How many do we want to count? The postal workers' struggle and the actions of the CWU leadership, the actions in the NHS and the Royal College of Nursing, the National Education Union, the list goes on, and we could go back many years, comrades. The point is that due to the fact that these union leaders have a relationship with the British state and a relationship with the Labour Party, they are looking for the ultimate reward for themselves. To draw on an article that Comrade Jason wrote, they want to become trade union barons. And look how many trade union leaders, of course, joined the vermin in ermine in the House of Lords. This is not an accident, comrades. This is a reward for a lifetime of service to British capitalism. And if we are going to tackle this problem, then the education process for the working class has to be drastically improved. I have been through, as I'm sure many of you have, trade union education courses which amount to how to get on well with the boss, how to be an adjunct of the HR department. What we need to radically change, comrades, is the way in which workers are educated. And we've seen examples in our past as to how successful this can be. We've seen, of course, and we should all remember the national minority movement and the national shop stewards movement back in the day. And the level of education that can be delivered by workers to workers outside of the trade union, official structure of the trade union movement, to be taken into it again. And that is one of the key purposes of the Class Consciousness Project, to actually build that educational program, to actually let workers know how they can actually be effective shop stewards and trade union representatives without being subjected to the mind-numbing influence of the official trade union education process, or at least knowing a way around it. Because the only way that we are going to take a single step forward in this time when British imperialism is in deep crisis, when the ruling class is ever more decayed and parasitic, is if we have more and more workers who are confident in themselves as political actors, in the class as a political actor in itself, in the working class as the subjects of history. We are the subjects of history. We are the class that can actually take not just Britain but the entire world forward. We are the ones who can actually renew the nation, not the poisonous and parasitic influence of the bourgeoisie. They are a class whose time has gone and who are there only to be overthrown. And so the Class Consciousness Project will work with and reach out to anybody who shares our aims of furthering the education and raising the consciousness level of the working class to the point where we can overcome the poisonous legacy of labourism, and in the end raise the working class to the point where we can confidently take on not just the employers at a local level, but the bourgeoisie themselves. And at that point, we can start to talk about socialism, comrades. Thank you, and I now hand over to my comrade.